Artist Susan Erony's work often has what art historians describe as tenebroso, Italian for dark, gloomy, mysterious. In many of her pieces, a warm central glow rises from umber shadows, not unlike the profound luminosity in a Rembrandt, an artist to whom she often returns. A source of light in Erony's mixed media work might be a salvaged Hebrew prayer book. A source of dark might be heavy layers of burned paper extracted from her wood stove. Sometimes the darks are created by butterfly wings, and sometimes just paint. Her style varies, but the subject in Erony's work consistently asks the most fundamental question of the last 100 years, a century piled high with human atrocity. Why do humans inflict such horror upon each other? The origin of this question for Erony exists within the closed curtains of her own family's home in Brookline, Massachusetts.
My heritage, meaning all my family members, was Ukrainian Jewish, and my family had to leave Ukraine both in my mother's parents' generation and then in my father's generation because of anti-Semitism. So my father was probably the most influential on me in those terms. And he was the youngest son in his family. And, I didn't realize this when I was a kid, the poor guy, I wish I had, but he was incredibly traumatized, very withdrawn. I used to think of him as almost catatonic, which I'm sure he wasn't. He wouldn't talk. I badgered the poor man with questions. He couldn't, I don't think he could talk about his past.
In the pogroms of the Russian Empire, 3 of Erony's uncles, her father's brothers, were executed in haystacks where their mother had hidden them. A 4th brother was a baby whose head was cut off, still in his mother's arms. Erony's father was hiding in a closet in the same room, but must have heard. That little boy, Erony's father, and his remaining family all made it to the United States by the 1930s. This history, her father's troubled silence inside an outwardly seeming normal American home, a grandmother's stinging command to be more compassionate, and an aunt's lessons in civil rights. These are what compelled Erony to social justice and, as an artist, to make institutionalized genocide, Stalin's Gulag, the Holocaust, the forcibly disappeared Chileans, a central subject in much of her work.
And I see other artists who draw and paint, sort of just like that. They just do it and they enjoy it. Or at least my sense is that they enjoy it, and they tell me they enjoy it. And I mean, that just doesn't happen for me. I have to know what I'm getting at with the piece.
In a series entitled Towers and Other Thoughts, Erony begins with the basic form of a ziggurat, an architectural mystery for its impossible size and inability to scale. This piece, entitled The Building of the Temple, is marked by gravestone blocks and Kafka's words, which Erony often includes. Kafka represents for her, among other messages, the richness of Jewish society before the Holocaust. Erony extends that basic ziggurat shape to make many other works, to address the evolving myth of the Tower of Babel, as a funeral pyre built with layers and layers of pages torn from the King James Bible, as haystacks. Beneath this work is her father's overcoat, which Erony wore for years after he died. In the late 1980s, Erony created a series of paintings based on photographs she had taken in Europe's concentration camps. She based the entire series on one compositional theme: the image of train tracks going through a main gate directly to a gas chamber. Erony thus managed the horror of genocide by leaning into composition and the worked surfaces of the pieces.
I often use surface treatment as a way to ease the viewer in. And also by just looking again at the piece as an aesthetic object. And so I had to detach from the subject matter to do that, but I couldn't paint like people in the camp or actual death, or I couldn't depict that. I wouldn't have and didn't want to, because I think that would have possibly, since I wasn't there, that would have interfered with the equilibrium between beauty and subject.
Erony is deliberate about creating a tension between the horrific reality of her content and the painstaking creation of her medium, the beauty of it.
That beauty, to me, is somehow protective, that it is about goodness. I believe beauty is about goodness. I do.
In 1989, Erony visited an abandoned Jewish synagogue in Lodz, Poland, that had miraculously survived the Holocaust. There had been a fire in the temple, and Erony salvaged burned Bibles and prayer books from a large pile of rained-on debris nearby.
And in Judaism, when a prayer book or anything with the name of God in it, any book, becomes unusable, it is supposed to be stored in an area called a geniza, which is a Hebrew word, and that is a place to rest until the books can be given a burial and had the prayer for the dead said over them. So they were actually treated almost as living beings. When I brought those books home, and I felt like, what do I do with these now? I know it's supposed to happen with them. And even though I was completely secular, I did want to respect the tradition. And so I spoke to a couple of rabbis and told them what I wanted to do was memorialize them in works of art. And somehow I got permission, and somehow that was enough for me.
With tweezers, Erony took every tiny flake of paper from the bag the books were in and created 6 works of art. The time-consuming precision of meticulously placing these crumbling sheets, at the same time honoring each desecrated word, created a ritual that has remained an integral part of her process. Erony considers books, all books, sacred objects, no matter what their content is. She collaborated for almost 10 years with German artist Erika Marquardt to create more than 1,000 small canvases, each one for a year of Hitler's proposed Third Reich. The canvases hung together were meant to feel like the inside of an illuminated manuscript. Erony employs handwritten words for their aesthetic. Writing letters for her is the equivalent of drawing. She says the order and repetition, even of the alphabet, calms her. In this piece entitled Othering, form and atmosphere are shaped by handwritten words. Erony metaphorically and literally expresses their power to effect change. Adjacent to her thematic work are still lives. Paintings which consistently keep her connected to process and to paint.
If I paint a bowl of figs, the figs become living beings to me. And just the act of painting in that case, where what I'm going for is the essence of what makes a fig, or what makes a fig look like a fig, and how miraculous it is that it exists. It gives me that feeling of just lush paint application. That's one of the most wonderful things I can do.
In the 1970s, Erony studied art at the Rhode Island School of Design and the Massachusetts College of Art. She has worked as a curator at the Cape Ann Museum. As a writer, Erony has taught and lectured on the role of art in society and its educational uses. She has exhibited in Europe, Canada, and the United States, and is represented in private collections in North America, Europe, and Israel. Erony and her partner came to Gloucester in 1995, believing they would be here for 4 months. From 2008 to 2010, Erony hand-transcribed Charles Olson's The Maximus poems, immersing herself physically as well as visually and intellectually inside the poet's ode to Gloucester. To Gloucester with Love is Erony's homage to this poet and this city, her home now for 30 years. Her work hangs in the Cape Ann Museum and is represented locally at the Matthew Swift Gallery. After January 6th, Erony retreated to the Manship Artist Residency in North Gloucester to consider a series addressing her complex and profound sadness about the actions on that day. Recently, Erony has been making work not about history, but about now, the changing climate, humanity's future, and safety. Safe places have become increasingly important to Erony. In her artist statement, she says she feels safest when she is making art. She goes to museums the way people go to temples, looking to art to make order from the world. Erony's first question, which was born over 100 years ago in a Ukrainian haystack, has not yet been answered, except in the process of making art. But it seems as if inside the city of Gloucester, Erony has found answers to different questions.
I just love walking down the street and having someone come up to me and say, I saw your work. I mean, it's so different. It feels like being an artist here is being part of the community. This place has such a history of artists and, being overrun with artists. But artists are accepted here in a way that is not always the case. Artists, eccentrics. Now, of course, it may change with the changes coming to Gloucester. But at least now I find it's just the most wonderful thing. I almost, I used to care about having an art career in the big world. Now I'm just happy if I get to show in Gloucester. I really am. And, I want my work to be here as much as possible.
Gloucester, it seems, has become for Erony a safe place to ask the questions.